I was sitting in my leather recliner, the one Margaret and I bought back in '98, watching a documentary about World War II, when my son-in-law stormed into my living room and ripped the cable right out of the TV. Just like that. "Enough of this trash," he said, holding up that black cable like some kind of trophy. "In this house, we watch smart things." I'm Harold Barnes, 63 years old, retired from the Chicago Tribune after 42 years of investigative journalism. And according to the deed sitting in my filing cabinet, I'm the sole owner of these 4 walls. But you wouldn't know it from the way I'd been living the past 18 months. My daughter Susan just stood there behind him. Didn't say a word. Didn't defend me. After everything I'd done for her, after letting them move into my house when they lost their apartment, she just nodded along like Ryan was making perfect sense. That hurt more than anything else. Not his arrogance, not his disrespect. The fact that my own daughter stood there and let it happen. "We're cultivating a more elevated atmosphere here," Ryan continued, like he was giving some kind of lecture. "More refined." He crossed the room and yanked the cable connector so hard it cracked. The screen dissolved into static, then darkness. The documentary narrator's voice talking about marine sacrifices was cut off as abruptly as if I'd been the one to die. I didn't say anything. What was the point? I'd learned over the past year and a half that speaking up only made things worse. Ryan had a way of twisting every conversation, making me feel like the unreasonable one. Susan would give me those looks that said, "Let it go, Dad. Don't make waves." So I just got up quietly and went upstairs to my bedroom. The same bedroom Margaret and I had shared for 35 years, and now feeling empty and cold. But that night, lying there staring at the ceiling, something clicked in my head. Something that had been sleeping for way too long. You see, I'd spent 4 decades as an investigative journalist. I'd exposed corrupt politicians, taken down fraudulent corporations, caught con artists who thought they were smarter than everyone else. I'd built a career on patience, documentation, and evidence. On knowing when to watch, when to wait, and when to act. For 18 months, I'd been watching and waiting. Watching Ryan take over my house. Watching Susan drift away from me. Watching myself disappear one small humiliation at a time. The watching was over. I got up and pulled out a yellow legal pad, the kind I'd used for every investigation I'd ever done. At the top, I wrote the date. October 18th, 2025. Below that, I started listing everything I'd noticed, but been too tired, too sad, too passive to act on. The credit card bills with charges I didn't recognize. At the whispered phone calls when they thought I was asleep. The way Ryan's eyes calculated the value of everything in my house when he thought I wasn't looking. The way he'd started helping with my mail, always getting to the mailbox first. The way Susan had stopped asking about my day, my health, my feelings about anything. For months, I'd been ignoring the red flags because I didn't want to lose Susan. She was all I had left after Margaret died. But maybe I'd already lost her anyway. Around 11 p.m., I heard voices through the wall. Ryan and Susan's bedroom shared a wall with mine, and they were having one of their quiet conversations. I couldn't make out the words, but I could hear that tone. Planning something, discussing something they didn't want me to know about. The shift felt physical, like flipping a switch that had been broken for years. Stop being a victim, I told myself. Start being a journalist. At midnight, I decided enough was enough. I slipped out of bed and pulled on the flannel robe Margaret had given me our last Christmas together and moved down the hallway like I hadn't in years. Slow and deliberate, rediscovering instincts I'd used on countless late-night investigations. My old study sat at the end of the hall. Ryan had taken it over as his office months ago, and I'd let him because Susan said he needed a quiet place to work on his real estate deals. The door wasn't locked. Why would it be? In Ryan's world, I was harmless, just some old guy who watched documentaries and complained quietly. I turned the handle and stepped inside. The room didn't smell like books and polish anymore. It reeked of his cologne and energy drinks. My desk, where I'd written some of my best investigative pieces, was buried under fast food wrappers and scattered papers. And there, glowing softly in sleep mode, was his laptop. I sat down in my old chair and touched the trackpad. The screen lit up instantly. No password. No security. I almost laughed. Here was Ryan Caldwell, who talked constantly about how smart he was, how he understood business and technology better than anyone, and he couldn't even secure his computer properly. For 42 years, I'd been an investigative journalist. I knew how to find information, how to follow paper trails, how to build airtight cases against people who thought they were untouchable. And Ryan had just handed me the keys to his entire digital life. The arrogance was staggering, but it was also his downfall. I started with his browser history, luxury restaurants I couldn't afford on my pension, designer clothing websites with price tags that made my eyes water, high-end electronics stores. A pattern was emerging, and it wasn't pretty. Then I moved to his email. Everything was logged in automatically. Banking apps, credit cards, text messages all synced to his phone. The level of digital sloppiness was incredible for someone who acted like he knew everything about modern life. I took out my phone and started photographing everything. Methodically. Carefully. My hands were steady now. This wasn't anger anymore. This was what I did best, building a case, following the evidence wherever it led. That's when I found the credit card statements. My credit card. The one I kept in my wallet for emergencies. The one I hadn't touched in months. According to these statements, I'd been living like a millionaire. $900 dinners at steakhouses I'd never heard of. $3,000 shopping sprees at boutiques downtown. Spa treatments labeled luxury wellness packages. Electronics purchases. A $2,400 laptop. A $1,800 watch. Expensive headphones I'd never seen. Weekend hotel stays at places that cost more per night than I used to spend on groceries in a month. The charges went back 6 months. Statement after statement, page after page. And each signature was close to mine, but wrong. Close enough to fool a cashier who wasn't paying attention. Not close enough to fool someone who'd been signing his own name for 63 years. I photographed every page, every forged signature, every ridiculous charge. The running total made my stomach turn. $47,000. In 6 months, my son-in-law had stolen $47,000 from me. And he'd documented it all, kept every receipt, like he was proud of his work. But that wasn't the worst thing I found on that laptop. As I was scrolling through his emails, looking for more evidence, I came across a folder labeled HB, Future Plans. My initials. Harold Barnes. Future Plans. My blood ran cold as I opened it. The first email was dated 3 months ago. The subject line read, Harold Barnes, Long-Term Care Options. It was a conversation between Ryan and someone named Patricia Coleman at Sunrise Meadows Memory Care Facility. Ryan's message was brief and calculated. Hi, Patricia. Thanks for taking my call yesterday. I'm looking into options for placing an elderly relative. He's becoming increasingly difficult to manage at home, showing signs of cognitive decline. What's the process for admission? Sometimes the most important investigation of your career isn't the one that makes headlines. It's the one that saves your own life and teaches others they don't have to be victims. Elderly relative. Difficult to manage. Cognitive decline. I was 63 years old and sharper than I'd been at 40. I could still remember phone numbers from 20 years ago, could recall conversations word for word, could analyze complex financial documents, Hell, I was analyzing them right now. But Ryan was painting me as some confused old man who couldn't take care of himself. Patricia Coleman's response was professional and sympathetic. She explained that they needed documented evidence of cognitive decline, a family consensus regarding the need for professional care, and either the patient's consent or legal power of attorney. The September email made my hands shake. Ryan had written, "The old man is becoming more stubborn and showing clearer signs of mental deterioration. Confusion about dates, repeating himself, occasional disorientation. My wife agrees he needs professional care for his own safety. We're both very concerned. What documentation would you need from us to move forward?" Every word was a lie. I'd never been confused about dates. I didn't repeat myself any more than anyone else. I'd never shown any signs of disorientation. This was pure fabrication, a manufactured case to justify putting me away so they could take my house. And he claimed Susan agreed. My own daughter had supposedly signed off on having me declared incompetent and shipped off to a memory care facility. Patricia's response outlined the roadmap. Physician's assessment documenting cognitive decline, on the establishment of power of attorney while the patient was still competent enough to sign, then admission paperwork. The final email, dated just 2 weeks ago, was the most damning. Ryan wrote, "Attached is the completed brochure and preliminary application with his information. Once Harold is placed in your facility and power of attorney is transferred, the house can be sold within 90 days to cover care costs. Property is valued around $800,000. After deducting facility expenses, that should leave substantial funds for long-term care management." I sat back in my chair, reading that email 3 times to make sure I wasn't imagining it. $800,000. My house. The house Margaret and I had bought in 1983 for $62,000. The house we'd painted together every few years, where we'd hosted Susan's birthday parties, where we'd celebrated holidays and anniversaries, where Margaret had taken her last breath in our bedroom upstairs. To Ryan, it was just a number on a real estate listing, an asset to be liquidated, and I was just an obstacle to be removed. I opened the attachment. It was a completed application for Sunrise Meadows with my full name typed at the top. Harold Richard Barnes. Date of birth, social security number, insurance information, all filled in without my knowledge or consent. There was even a medical history section where Ryan had fabricated symptoms: increasing forgetfulness, difficulty with daily tasks, confusion about time and place, occasional aggressive behavior when corrected. Aggressive behavior when corrected. That was rich, coming from someone who'd never seen me raise my voice in 18 months of living in my house. I looked at the photos on my desk. Margaret and me at Niagara Falls for our 30th anniversary, both of us laughing at something I couldn't remember now. What would she think of all this? What would she say about our daughter standing by while her husband planned to steal everything we'd worked for? The betrayal wasn't just financial. It was personal. It was the systematic erasure of my dignity, my independence, my very identity. Ryan hadn't just been stealing my money. He'd been stealing my life, piece by piece, preparing to make me disappear entirely. I connected my phone to my laptop and started copying files. Evidence folder. Ryan Caldwell fraud case. Every email, every forged signature, every fake medical claim. Multiple backups. Phone, computer, USB drive. Redundancy was everything in investigative work. By 3 a.m., I had complete documentation. $47,000 in fraud. A conspiracy to have me declared incompetent, a plan to sell my house while I lived out my remaining years in a facility I'd never consented to enter. The cable wasn't just about television. It was about cutting me off from everything: my autonomy, my home, my dignity. Ryan had been preparing to erase me completely, but he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated exactly who he was dealing with. The next morning, I woke up before dawn with the clearest head I'd had in months. Maybe years. I'd spent the night documenting a conspiracy against me, and instead of feeling defeated, I felt energized. This was familiar territory: investigation, evidence, building a case. This was what I'd done for 42 years. At 7 a.m. sharp, I called Vincent Torres, an attorney I'd known since the 1990s. We'd worked together on a corruption case where I'd provided the investigative legwork, and he'd handled the prosecution. If anyone could help me navigate this mess, it was Vincent. "Harold, good to hear from you. What's going on?" "Vincent, I need legal help. It's about elder abuse, and I'm the victim." The line went quiet for a moment. Then, "Jesus, Harold, tell me what happened." I gave him the summary: the credit card fraud, the nursing home conspiracy, the forged documents. When I finished, Vincent was quiet for a long time. "Harold, what you're describing is serious federal crime territory. Elder financial abuse, identity theft, conspiracy to commit fraud. If you have the documentation you're telling me about, Ryan could be looking at 5 to 10 years in federal prison." "I have everything. Photos, emails, bank statements, the whole conspiracy laid out in his own words." "Good. Don't confront them yet. Don't let on that you know anything. We need to secure everything legally first. Can you meet Monday morning? My office, 9 a.m. I'll be there." Next call was to Tony Martinez, a locksmith who'd been in business in our neighborhood for 25 years. Margaret and I had used him back in 2003 when we'd locked ourselves out. "Tony, this is Harold Barnes over on Maple Street. I need all my locks changed today." "Every entry point." "How soon you need this done?" "Harold?" "This morning if possible, before noon." "I can be there in an hour. Standard deadbolts? The best you've got? High security?" Tony arrived at 9 a.m. with his white van and 2 heavy toolboxes. He took one look at my existing locks and shook his head. "These are 20 years old, Harold. Anyone with basic lockpicking skills could get through them in 30 seconds. How long for new ones?" "High security deadbolts? Give me 3 hours. You'll have keys, and only you'll have keys." While Tony worked, the sound of his drill cutting into my door frame felt like reclaiming territory. Each old lock that came out was 18 months of Ryan walking through my house like he owned it. Each new lock that went in was me taking control back. "These are top of the line," Tony explained as he installed the front door lock. "Bump-proof, pick-resistant. You get 5 sets of keys for each lock." By noon, I had 4 new deadbolts and 20 keys total. Tony handed me the first set, and when I tested the front door lock, the solid click of the bolt sliding home felt like victory. "What do I owe you, Tony?" He named his price, and I added an extra $100. "For the same-day service." Tony pocketed the cash and shook my hand. "You take care of yourself, Harold. Whatever's going on, you did the right thing calling me." At 1 p.m., I drove to Community First Bank, where Margaret and I had banked for 30 years. Linda Foster, the branch manager, had known us since we opened our first joint account. When I showed her the credit card evidence, her face went white. "Mr. Barnes, this totals $47,000. "I know. My son-in-law forged my signature and used my card for 6 months. I never made any of these purchases." She immediately pulled up my account. "We're freezing this card right now. No more transactions can be made. I'm also placing enhanced fraud protection on all your accounts. Any transaction over $50 will require voice verification directly from you." Linda spent the next hour generating reports, completing affidavits, and creating a paper trail. Every signature I made, my real signature, felt like reclaiming my identity. "Mr. Barnes," she said as we finished, "this is textbook elder financial abuse. You'll want to contact law enforcement and an attorney." "Already handled," I told her. By 4 p.m. I was back home. New locks, fraud reported, legal counsel scheduled. Now came the hardest part. Waiting. I spent the afternoon moving through my house like I hadn't in months. Really looking at it. The living room where Margaret and I used to watch movies. The kitchen where she'd make Sunday morning pancakes. The dining room where we'd hosted Thanksgiving dinners when Susan was growing up. This wasn't just a house worth $800,000. This was 40 years of memories, of building a life together. And Ryan had looked at it like a commodity to be liquidated. Well, I made myself a simple dinner and ate at the kitchen table. No TV, no distractions. Just the quiet of my own house and the satisfaction of knowing I'd spent the day fighting back. At 6:15 p.m., I heard them coming. Ryan's truck first, that aggressive rumble he thought made him sound successful. Then Susan's sedan, pulling in right behind him. I sat in my leather recliner and waited. Through the front window, I could see them walking up the path, tired from their workdays, probably looking forward to another evening of controlling my house, my environment, my life. The sound I'd been waiting for came right on schedule, metal scraping against metal. Ryan's key sliding into a lock that no longer recognized it. "What the hell?" His voice came through the door, muffled but clear. "Key's not working." More jiggling, more frustration. I could picture his face, confusion turning to anger. "Let me try mine," Susan said. Same result, same bewilderment. The doorknob rattled. Then came the pounding. "Harold! Was open this door!" I stood up slowly, walked to the front door, and opened it exactly 6 inches. The security chain stretched tight between us, a visible barrier between the life I'd been living and the life I was reclaiming. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice calm and steady. Ryan's face was flushed red with rage. "What did you do to the locks? What's wrong with you?" "Actually, Ryan, this is my house. You were guests. Past tense." "Dad," Susan's voice cracked behind him. "What's going on? Why can't we get in?" I looked at my daughter through that 6-inch gap. "Because I know about everything. The credit card fraud, the $47,000 you stole from me, the nursing home plan. I know it all." The words hung in the air between us. Ryan tried to shove the door, but the security chain held firm. "You're insane," he shouted. "You're senile. Yet you don't know what you're talking about." I reached behind me and pulled out one of the printed credit card statements. I slid it through the 6-inch gap. Forged signature. The bank's fraud department confirmed it this morning. Susan picked up the paper with trembling hands. Her eyes moved across the page, taking in charge after charge she'd never seen. Signatures that looked like mine, but weren't quite right. "Ryan," she whispered, "this is real. These are real charges." "Don't listen to him, Susan. He's confused. He's old and paranoid." I pulled out one of the emails I'd printed. "This is your correspondence with Sunrise Meadows Memory Care, planning to have me committed so you could sell my house." The paper fluttered through the gap. Susan caught it, read it, and I watched her whole world change. Her face went white, then red, then white again. "You were going to put my father in a nursing home?" Her voice cracked. "You were going to sell his house without telling me?" Ryan grabbed her arm, not gently. "It's not what it looks like. No, we were trying to help him." "By stealing $47,000? I asked through the gap. "That money was going to be ours anyway," Ryan snapped, his mask finally slipping completely. "When the old man dies, when the house gets sold, we were just speeding up the process." The silence that followed was deafening. Susan stared at her husband like she was seeing him for the first time. Get off my property, I said quietly. Both of you. Now. You can't do this! Ryan pounded the door again. We have rights! Actually, you don't. This is my house, Ryan. Check the deed. That's when he pulled out his phone. Fine. I'm calling the police. Reporting elder abuse. You're not competent to live alone. Please do, I said. I have fraud reports, forged signatures, email evidence, and a meeting with my attorney Monday morning. 20 minutes later, red and blue lights washed across my front yard. Two police cruisers pulled up to the curb. Officer Garcia and his partner approached the porch where Ryan was still yelling about his rights. Officers, thank God, Ryan said immediately. My father-in-law is having some kind of breakdown. He's locked us out of our own home. Officer Garcia looked from Ryan to me, still visible through the 6-inch gap. Sir, are you the homeowner? I am. Harold Barnes, sole owner. Property's been paid off since 2008. I held up the deed. These people were guests who've overstayed their welcome. He's lying, Ryan protested. He's senile. He needs to be evaluated. Officer Garcia held up one hand. Mr. Barnes, may I come inside to speak with you? I unhooked the chain and let him in, closing the door behind us. In my living room, I had everything laid out like the journalist I'd always been. Property deed, mortgage satisfaction, credit card fraud reports, bank statements, printed emails. Officer Garcia examined each document carefully. Mr. Barnes, what you're showing me constitutes elder financial abuse, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit fraud. You have every right to refuse them entry to your property. I just want my house back, officer. I understand. We'll need formal statements, but right now they need to leave immediately. Garcia returned to the porch. Mr. Caldwell, Mrs. Barnes, this property belongs to Harold Barnes. He's provided documentation of financial crimes. You need to leave now. But we live here, Susan protested. Not anymore, Garcia said firmly. If you don't leave voluntarily, I'll arrest you for criminal trespass. That's when I opened the door wider and brought out 4 blue suitcases. I'd packed their belongings that afternoon, while Tony was changing the locks. Everything they'd brought into my house, ready to go. The humiliation on Ryan's face was complete. He grabbed 2 suitcases and stormed to his truck without looking back. Susan stood frozen on my porch for a moment. Dad, she said, one word that contained 18 months of confusion and 36 years of being my daughter. I wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come. She picked up the remaining suitcases and walked to Ryan's truck. They drove away, taillights disappearing around the corner. 3 days passed in blessed silence. Then, at 9:30 p.m. on a Thursday, my phone rang. Dad? Susan's voice was barely a whisper, terrified. Help me. Please. I was in my truck before she finished explaining. She was locked in the bathroom of their cheap apartment while Ryan pounded on the door, drunk and violent. I called 911 on the way, arrived as police were arresting him for domestic violence. Susan fell into my arms that night, sobbing like the scared little girl she'd once been. You were right about everything, she whispered. I'm so sorry, Dad. 4 months later, my house sounds completely different. Was not the suffocating silence of those 18 months, not the tension of conflict. It echoes with purpose now. Every Wednesday at 2 p.m., my living room fills with 12 people in folding chairs, sharing coffee and stories. We call ourselves the Wednesday Support Group. Elder abuse survivors helping each other recognize warning signs, heal from betrayal, and reclaim our dignity. The hardest part, Dorothy Sullivan tells the group today, was admitting my own nephew would steal from me. Heads nod around the circle. We all understand. Susan moved back home for 6 weeks while she got back on her feet. Ryan took a plea deal. 18 months in county jail, 5 years probation, restitution of $47,000. Susan filed for divorce the day his sentence was announced. Now she lives in her own apartment across town and visits twice a week. We cook dinner together and talk about her work, her therapy sessions, her plans for the future. And she's the daughter I raised again, not the stranger who stood behind Ryan that October night. In my desk drawer sits a small box with that black cable, coiled carefully inside. I keep it as a reminder. That cable was an ending and a beginning. An ending of who I was. The man who let people walk all over him. A beginning of who I needed to become. Someone who stands up, who survives, who fights back. At 63, I learned you're never too old to reclaim your dignity. Never too old to use the skills you've spent a lifetime developing. Never too old to start over. If you're reading this and see yourself in my story, know this. You have more strength than you realize. It's never too late to fight back. And you are definitely not alone. Sometimes the most important investigation of your career isn't the one that makes headlines. It's the one that saves your own life and teaches others they don't have to be victims. But the skills that built your career don't retire when you do. They just wait for the moment when you need them most to defend everything you've worked a lifetime to build.